glad you're with us.
All right, well,
Are you ready?
I'm ready to get started.
We're going to talk about a topic today that most of the time people don't want to talk about. That's why we've renamed it.
Yes.
And so we've named our topic
Cheerful Endurance.
Cheerful Endurance.
So this
and
is...
another word for cheerful endurance is...
patience.
Ooh, patience. I want patience, and I want it right now. So,
well, this is cheerful endurance is actually the Greek meaning for the word patience. And so our scripture today, or one of them, is James 1:4. He says, "But let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing." So patience is cheerful endurance, and perfect there means complete. Like it's come to fruition. It's
so
complete.
When it talks about let
mature.
patience have her perfect work, in other words, let it do what it was sent to do. Let it complete the work that it's trying to do in your life. So think about how many times we're waiting on something and then we get anxious or we get upset and we end up blowing it. And so then guess what we have to do?
You have to go back and do it again.
You have to take that test all over again.
Because with God, it's not, you don't flunk out.
Right, and what you have
to take it over.
Patience is sent for a reason. It's doing what? It's having a work in you. And James said, let patience have its perfect work in you. It's not just a off-the-cuff remark, well, you need to have more patience. It's something that God's trying to get in us.
Well, okay, so think about God's timing. That's one of the things. And we're all still going through with the COVID, right? So we're in that waiting time and trying to be patient. But with God's timing, sometimes we don't want to be patient, with God and what He's doing. We want it, and we want it right now. So you're getting distracted. People driving by.
Sorry.
I'm trying to be patient with you.
I'm trying to let patience.
I saw his eyes veering off.
So,
we got lots of windows in our house.
So here's what we have to understand. Everything's about timing, right? If we, the right time to propose, the right time to turn a steak over, you propose too early and you scare the girl off. You turn the steak too quick, and it's not done. So you've got to, when you talk about God's timing, what you have to understand is that God's timing isn't always our timing.
That's right.
I remember, and we've talked about this when I knew I was going to be an evangelist, but at 18 years old, I was ready to go right now, and I wanted to go now. But it wasn't the right time, and this was about God's timing. And thank God that God was patient with me. Because if I had sprung out of the gate, I'm telling you, I would have fallen flat on my face. I wasn't ready. God had to get some things in me, and I had to learn how to wait on God's timing. God's not trying to withhold something from us. He's trying to get something to us. And so we have to remember that and just trust Him.
And just think of how patient He is with us every day. And so when He doesn't bring something to us, we're ready, to well, I guess it isn't coming. But He just wants us to be patient with His timing. It makes me think of that song, "You can't hurry God, you just have to wait. You gotta trust Him and give Him time, no matter how long it takes. He's a God you can't hurry, but He'll be there, don't you worry. He may not come when you want Him, but He's right on time." He's going to be right on time, and it may not be our time.
Was I on tune? Oh, okay.
Yes,
we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we will talk about it. Anyway, back to this. Okay, so Psalms 37:7 says, "Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for Him." So you just talked about going on evangelistic fields. So let patience have her perfect work. So this is something that you've had to learn in going into different countries.
Right. If you don't let patience have her perfect work, if you don't learn how to operate in patience, I can promise you'll end up operating in frustration. And so one of the things that I learned doing mission work, and it was It was a standard line that I used with everybody that went on a trip with me. And we would tell them the first rule in mission work is hurry up and wait. In other words, you're going to have to learn how to just wait things out.
Be there on time, but then you may have to wait a while.
You may be right on schedule and hit that border right when you're supposed to hit that border. But then all of a sudden you get tied up in customs. Look, friend, I've been in customs, for hours and hours, man, just waiting to get clearance. I mean, I think there was one time we were in customs for like 8 to 10 hours just waiting to get clearance. And if you're not careful, you get so frustrated, you might as well turn around and go back home, because you're not going to help anybody once you get down there, because you're ready to bite everybody's head off. So you just have to let God, trust God with timing. God knows what he's doing, and so we just have to trust him. And if we learn how to do that, we can kind of relax. You know what I'm talking about? Instead of being on edge, just take a deep breath, relax, and let God do it.
Well, I have learned and found out, because this is every day in our life, but if I was anxious about something and wanted it right now, it didn't come for a long time, it seemed like. It wasn't until I just let it go, and just said, because what happens is there's a quote down here, let me get to it right now, and it says, the secret to patience is doing something else in the meantime. That's Croft M. Pence. The secret to patience is to do something else in the meantime. So it wasn't until I got my mind on something else, busy and trying to be productive, that then it finally came to me and I wasn't so concerned about it. And so that was, in maturing us in patience. It doesn't mean that we always get it right, and it won't be until he comes, but every day we get to have that opportunity. But you don't have to get frustrated.
Right. The scripture in Isaiah 40 and 31 where it says, they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. That phrase, wait upon, literally can be translated patiently expecting. So in other words, you're patient, but there's an expectation to that patience. It's not like you're kicked back and going, man, this is never going to happen. It's never going to come to... So think of it this way. Think about a father in the waiting room of the labor ward. That he knows his wife is in there having a baby. He doesn't know how long it's going to take her. And he may be pacing back and forth, but he's patiently expecting. He's expecting them to come out with that newborn baby, and that's going to change everything in his life. So he's not in there in the room with his wife going, come on, would you hurry up and have this baby? Would you, what are you waiting on? You've been carrying that thing for 9 months. Don't you think it's time to have? You don't do that, not if you want to live. you have to.
And he has to be patient with her. Yeah. Because at that time,
exactly.
You're not on guard.
So when she was,
you ain't gonna tell
when she was expecting, I was in there with her, trying to encourage her and strengthen her. And we were, I was trying to tell her how to breathe, and I'm looking at her and I said,
I was losing
come on,
patience.
I said, just breathe, honey, just
breathe
relax,
with
just
me.
breathe with me.
He's just,
and she looked at me and she said, oh, shut up. I was the last one she wanted telling her.
It was right up in my face, and I was not prayed up. Okay.
So that comes to waiting patiently. You have to, if you don't have everything intact and your mind isn't where it ought to be,
being very nice.
But she was in pain.
I was in a lot of pain.
And the truth is that when you're hurting, and that can be physically, or it can be spiritually. It can be that you have a wounded heart, that you feel alone, that you feel like nobody cares, and you're wounded. And you have to understand something. Wounded people wound people. So if you're wounded and you haven't taken that hurt to God and allow God, and then patiently wait for God to heal it, otherwise think about it this way, like a wound on your hand. If you cut your hand and you don't treat it, you don't do anything to it, it gets infected, and it starts hurting more and more. And in some instances, people have had to have a hand amputated because they didn't treat a scratch. And so you don't want to let it go. You want to take it to God and trust God that He's going to heal you, but it will be in His timing.
That's right. Well, so we're talking about now being patient with others.
Right. And one of the things, let's talk about when we first got married.
Let's just talk about me.
So let's see, do you have any of that down there? What were we going to talk about? So, okay, here we go.
There's plenty. There's
Here
plenty
it is.
with me.
Okay, so when we were talking about...
Remember, I was 16 when we married. He was 20. I had a lot of growing up to do.
When we first got married, I was teaching Debbie... actually, what happened is we traded cars.
Well, before that, you taught me with your Jeep.
Right, I taught her how to drive a stick shift. She'd never driven a manual transmission, so I was teaching her how to drive a stick shift.
You had to be very patient.
She did well. There were a few times that we did this.
Stop.
But she did well.
It's embarrassing,
but then it
too.
had been years since she drove one.
Yeah.
And we were on
that was
the
a
field.
3-speed, and then now it's a 5-speed, so it's a little different.
And so I got another vehicle. It was a Ford Topaz, brand new, and it had a standard transmission. It was a 5-speed.
Because it was supposed to be really good on gas.
I got her in there trying to teach her how to do it, and I was taking her up
on
a hill.
And
she looked at me. She got so frustrated, and she said, "You bought this car for you." And but
he had to be patient.
She just, I just kept on.
But I'm
with
glad.
her.
I'm glad though, because now I can just get in and drive any stick shift.
She jumps in my truck and drives it, and it's a stick shift. And so what happens is sometimes the process may be painful.
Yeah.
But what you get out of the process is worth the waiting for, right?
That's right. So yeah, you had to be patient with my cooking when we first married.
Yeah, we had wonderful dinner. I remember
we had a neighbor next door, and we invited her for supper, and I had never fried chicken before in my life.
And when I cut into it, I heard that chicken started to bleed a little bit. It
looked good on the outside now.
The neighbor
was
was an elderly lady, and I remember the look on her face.
She was trying to be nice.
And she looked at that chicken, her eyes got big. So anyway, but she cooks very well now.
Well, so I had to be patient with you too.
Right. So what is that?
Oh, picking up clothes?
Yeah.
I didn't put that. You must have put that down there.
What's that say?
But it's true. I had to have patience with picking up clothes, and how I never have to worry about it now. Did you write that down? He's been in my notebook here.
And now she never has to worry about it.
That's not true.
See?
Okay. Sometimes he's done a lot better, but I used to have to pick up his clothes a lot.
Yeah, but not near like.
No, he'll lay it on the chair now. He has done a lot better.
So it's about patience. Everybody say patience with each other.
And we talked about singing today. How that when I first met him, I'm telling you, he could not carry a tune at all. It was like he was tone deaf. And so, unless he was singing an Elvis Presley song, and then he was right on too, because he heard him a lot. He heard him a lot. So I remember we would be driving, and
Elvis should have sang more gospel. That's all.
But I would go do.
Oh yeah, she would.
It was like Barney Fife. You remember the episode of Barney Fife whenever he wants to sing in the choir? He's taking. Is that right? He's taking voice lessons. And how does he go?
Tell me.
Me they.
So he's at his voice teacher going, me, they. I owe you, I owe you. Well, she used to do that with me, except it was that.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
And we would go down the road doing that.
And I'd say, honey, okay, now let's try it again.
And she would go, and she'd stop me, and she'd say, listen. Do.
Good. But before it'd be like, if I say do, he'd go, do. But we just kept working with it.
And after a while, I finally got her where she is today.
But just patience with one another, and learning each other.
The other thing you have to remember is that because you're waiting for something doesn't mean that it's supposed to be a drag. Remember, they that wait upon
Cheerful
the Lord,
endurance is what it means.
Patiently expecting. Cheerful endurance So you need to learn how to enjoy your journey.
We need to learn how.
Yeah, exactly. Enjoy where you're at until you get where you're going. And God will honor that. When we approach him in that manner and with that spirit, God will honor it.
You know, there's a quote from Craig Bruce. It says, you usually have to wait for that which is worth waiting for. And that's the truth. If you can look at your life and say, yeah, when I finally got it, it really was worth waiting for. So something worth waiting for, I mean, it's worth the wait. Okay.
How many of you remember when computers first came out?
Yes.
Those of us now, look, I was at my son's house the other day. My little 2-year-old granddaughter takes my phone.
Our little 2-year-old granddaughter.
takes my phone, and she takes that little
Yes.
finger
She'll
and she
swipe
starts
it.
scrolling through the screens until she found the app she wanted, and she starts the app, pushes it, opens the thing up, and starts playing this barnyard game. And I'm looking at her thinking, what in the world? I remember when computers first came out, you know, I was in my 20s probably, and it was such a challenge to learn those computers. How many of you remember the Tandy 1000, you know, that Radio Shack computer? And then, and they just kept getting more and more intelligent, and I felt like I was getting dumber and dumber all the time. And I remember, you know, we were traveling on the mission or evangelistic field, and I was trying to put together a tape series. You know, we did tape ministry, and trying to create the picture that would go inside this folder, so the binding had to be right on it and all that. And I'm telling you, I was getting so frustrated. If I'm going to be transparent with you, I wanted to go get a baseball bat and take it to that computer. And I would feel like I finally got it right, and I'd show it to Debbie, and Debbie would come in.
Uh-oh.
And she would go, honey, I know you can do better than that. And I would just,
but he did.
And when that was what she'd say, she said, no, I know you can do it. Don't settle for, you can make this, you can make this. And when I finally got it to where she really liked it, man, she celebrated me. You know, oh, that's so wonderful, that's so wonderful. And isn't that what we all want? Don't we all want to be celebrated?
Yeah.
Aren't we all looking for that cheering section, you know, that Hebrews talked about, seeing that we're compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses?
Cheering you on.
Let's run the race that's in front of us. And we're supposed to run it how? We do it patiently.
Yeah.
Looking unto who?
Jesus.
Looking unto Jesus, because he's been there and done that.
You know, when you were talking about the computer, it reminded me of our pastor friend, Glenn Davis. He had written a book, and he lost it on the computer 12 times.
Oh my goodness.
He had to go back 12 times. He didn't give up.
I mean, at one point I remember him talking to me. He said, man, brother, he said, I just felt like, you know, what's the point? But he persevered and got it, and finally got it done. But I'm telling you, that was a test of his patience.
When he took it to the computer store, they actually recovered it, so he wouldn't have had to do that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, because it wiped all his work. His book was complete, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it wiped it out, but he went back 12 times and redid that. But you talk about, and it was, I know through the process, he got some good stuff out of it. He could probably quote his whole book after that, but
well, and teach a wonderful lesson on patience.
Yeah, but that was something. So you mentioned about a teacher.
Well, I was talking about, to try and put it in perspective for us, a teacher has a whole new set of students that shows up in her class each year to learn things that they don't know anything about. And so she has to have patience with those students coming in, because she's going to attempt to teach them things they've never been taught, things that they don't know. And those students are not going to learn at the same level. It's for some will catch on much quicker than others. And so she can't just, you know, go in and take her cream of the crop students and focus on them and say, well, the rest of you can just forget it. She has to be patient with them. And she has to maybe spend more time with them and invest more in them, so they don't get left behind but she's able to bring them up where they need to be. And that takes patience.
Well, and then being patient with ourselves. You know, sometimes we can give up, like we were talking today, at the brink of our miracle or the breakthrough, because, I mean, we're not being patient with ourselves and allowing God to take us through that process. You know, I remember you preaching about the not the pressure cooker, but the
Processor.
processor.
The process.
Is that what it's called? Processor? I don't know. But anyway, you were talking about the process, that it's fast food, okay? It's not fast food with God. It's a crock pot.
Right.
You know, you got to let it cook. But when it's done, it's good.
Right. It's the difference between popping a TV dinner or somebody spending hours preparing a meal. Now, you may get the TV dinner quick, but you're not going to enjoy it like you would that home-cooked meal.
So when you say patience, even the word speaks about, we've heard about the patience of Job. And so if you can share what he went through.
Well, you understand that Job, you know, these were God's words, that there was none like him in all the earth. That's not what Job said about himself. That's what God said about Job to Satan. He said, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there's none like him? He loves me. He does what's right." And so, you know, the story, Satan begins to say, "Well, of course he does. Who wouldn't? You know, you treat him so wonderful. Why wouldn't he? You know?" And you don't. He said, "You take that hedge down, and he'll curse you to your face." And God had so much faith in Job that he said, "You can touch his stuff."
For God to have faith in someone.
Think about it. Think about it. You remember that when Jesus saw the faith of the centurion? When the centurion looked at him and he said, "Lord," he said, "I'm not worthy for you to come under my roof." And he said, "Just speak the word and my servant will be healed." He said, "Because I understand authority." What that servant was saying is, I recognize who you are. I understand the authority you have.
Yes.
When Jesus heard that, the Bible said that he marveled. The kind of faith that would make God marvel. And so Job is exposed to an onslaught of the devil. He loses everything he has, and still he would not curse God. His wife even looked at him and said, "Why don't you just curse God and die?" And Job said, "The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." He held on to it. You have to understand that the life that we're experiencing right now, I understand it's the only one we know.
It's temporary.
But it is. It's just a temporary life. This is just passing through. The life that we experience after this is the one that's eternal. And so, you know, think about this. Think about giving up let's look at it like you're hungry, right? And you know that I want you to think about your favorite food, whether that's lobster or crab legs or filet mignon or whatever it is, your favorite food. Think about your favorite food. And you know that someone is on the way to your house and they've prepared this full meal. And they did it just for you. And then you go to the refrigerator and you see a chunk of bologna. And you end up, because you're hungry right now.
Yeah.
And they're going to be here any minute, but you're hungry right now. And so you reach in and eat a big chunk of that bologna. And as soon as you swallow it, they pull up. And now you can't enjoy what was meant for you because you settled for something less. Think about that. You're not going to enjoy the lobster. You're not going to enjoy the steak. You're not going to, whatever your favorite, you're not going to enjoy it because now we're full of baloney, right? And isn't that the truth? Sometimes that's what...
Because we settle.
We settle for less. We end up full of baloney. We start thinking wrong. We start acting wrong. And it's all because we get impatient. But if we'll let patience have her perfect work. What's that definition again of patience?
Cheerful endurance.
Cheerful endurance. Cheerful. I mean, think about it. How many times have you seen someone in a store that had been waiting for a long time, and then all of a sudden, boy, they just lost it? You know?
I've been waiting here all day.
Yeah, I've been waiting all day, and and then and
It doesn't make it come sooner.
no, it doesn't. And as a
Sometimes
matter
it
of
delays
fact,
the process.
It ends up making you feel less because instead of
Because it's how we wait.
showing the presence of God, instead of waiting expectantly, we let flesh take over.
Well, Romans 8:25 says, "But if we hope for that we see not, then do we with patience wait for it." So even though we don't see it, we're hoping for it, and then
Right.
with patience we wait for it because good comes. And then Psalms 37:3 says, "Trust in the Lord and do good." It's like that quote earlier. So he's saying, just trust me and then do good. In other words, we got to get our mind on something else. We're waiting for this big thing, and it's worth waiting for. But then he said, just trust me, and then just start doing good. Psalms 46:10 says, "Be still, be patient. Be still and know that I am God." So when he says be still, still there means to let it alone.
How many of you have ever, with a cake in the oven, you keep opening the door and looking at it? You got to
It
let
drops.
it alone, or you're going to cause that cake to fall. So we have to. You remember there was a phrase that my dad used to say a lot. Leave well enough alone. In other words, don't keep trying to change something. Just leave it alone. Let it do its thing. You've got to if you're doing a pressure cooker, you've got to let it do its thing. Let it cook inside that. You can't open up a pressure cooker and peek in it every 5 minutes. You've got to keep it sealed and let it alone so it can do what it was intended to do.
So did you finish about Job?
Well,
The end result?
Job's end result is, you remember now, Job finally he squares off with his friends, and they're miserable comforters. But in the beginning of Job's turmoil, Job makes a statement, and he said, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust him." Job did not understand what he was going through, but he was just going to trust God. And at the end of it, he's just, he's beside himself, and he finally says, "I would that God would appear before me as a judge so I could plead my case to him." And guess what happened? God shows up. And when God shows up, Job said, "I abhorred myself, and I repented in dust and ashes, because I uttered things that were too marvelous for me to understand."
He didn't understand.
He didn't understand what God was doing.
But he hung in there.
And he was so sorry for it. But God took him and restored him, gave him back more than he lost. And he was known throughout the land for not just his wisdom and for the prosperity that God had brought to him, but for his beautiful children, his daughters. And his friends had to go to Job and ask Job, because they'd been throwing off on Job this whole time. Well, this wouldn't have happened to you if you'd been living right, and I mean, just throwing off on him and throwing off on him. And finally, God makes his friends go back to Job. He said, "Now you go to Job and ask him to pray for you, or you're going to be in a mess of trouble." In other words, God was getting ready to take his hand off of them. So Job learned a valuable lesson, that he may not come when you want him, but he's right on time.
That's right. Well, and so you have to remember this. Don't give up on the brink of your miracle. Hang in there, patiently waiting, cheerfully enduring, because it's coming. Good things are coming to you, and don't give up.
I bet
Just be patient.
I really believe if Job were here to speak to you today, he would
Say,
tell
hang
you
on, hang
the
on.
best is yet to come.
That's right.
Amen. Let's pray. Father, we're thankful for your patience with us,
Yes, Jesus.
how you loved us. You
How you
refused to
loved us.
give up on us, God, and you came seeking us. You came to seek and save that which was lost, and that was us. We thank you for it, God. And we pray, Lord, that you'll help us to allow patience to have her perfect work in our lives. Let us wait expectingly. Let us be cheerful in the waiting, knowing, God, that what we're waiting for is worth waiting for. In Jesus' name.
Thank you, Jesus.
Amen.
Amen.
We love you guys.
We
Hope
love
you have
you
a
all.
wonderful evening. You be blessed, and we'll see you tomorrow night, all right?
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.